I wasn't planning on making this deck, but I pulled Neerdiv and thought, I've got nothing better to do on a Saturday night, so here we are. Neerdiv Devious Diver is a commander that wants to tap herself to mill cards. There are two routes that are immediately obvious here, stuff like Intruder Alarm that allows you to tap and untap creatures over and over, or the classic turn sideways and swing in. I opted for the latter, where evasion is especially important, because I think you can seriously threaten commander damage as a win condition with Neerdiv and this deck construction. What I mean is, by playing around our graveyard and flashback-like effects, Neerdiv will just naturally become a dangerous threat on my board, versus a tap-untap simulator. She'll feed herself with each attack by milling, and the rest of the deck will be built around that premise. Knowing how this deck wants to play around Neerdiv, I had my goals for building the 99. Make Neerdiv evasive so she can swing in without dying, cast stuff from my graveyard and activate graveyard abilities, and mill myself. I did a really good job of the first and last of these goals, but utilizing my graveyard proved to be the greatest challenge of this deck. Let me show you why. I set out over the course of a few hours Saturday night, while watching Emily in Paris with my fiance, to find every card I own that could fit in a deck. I only have bulk from the last year or so, meaning my options are pretty limited. The earliest set I have much bulk from is Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. So what do I own that's good from Neo? Well, only one card really. Eliminating any thoughts of foreshadowing, Jin-Jitaxi's Progress Tyrant was one of the strongest cards I owned. It doesn't accomplish, well, really any of the goals I set out to accomplish while building the deck, but it's a good stuff card in a deck full of bad cards. Including Jin-Jitaxis is like when you have a really dope set of matching armor in Champions of Norath, but suddenly find a breastplate that's at least 2 times better than what you've currently got. It's just a stat check. Another good stuff card I had sitting around in a binder was Fairy Mastermind from Mark to the Machine. I played this one too, and yep, it drew me cards. However, speaking of my binder, I heard a fairy tale of a few cards that could make a pretty big impact in this deck. I'm obviously talking about the Wilds of Eldraine bonus sheet, which was chock full of enchantments that were seemingly perfect for this deck. As Foretold would allow me to cheat out spells, which is good in a deck full of overcosted garbage. Compulsion would help me fill my graveyard. Curiosity would be great attached to Neerdiv, and Fraying Sanity was exactly what I was looking for in a mill engine. It's important to note at this point, I'm trying to mill myself in this deck, not mill out opponents. I managed to play as Foretold, Curiosity, and Fraying Sanity in the one game I played, and Fraying Sanity was by far the best card in this deck when it came to satisfying my mill goal. In fact, I almost decked myself before ultimately dying in a pretty close game with Francisco Foul Marauder and Malcolm Keen-Eyed Navigator and Delina Wild Mage. Curiosity performed really well, but I casted as Foretold just a little late, so it didn't get to hit critical mass, and I didn't get to cheat out any really big spells. Another notable mention from the main set of Wilds of Eldraine, the Iron Crag was a meme inclusion. I just needed the ramp, but I do think it's a really undervalued mana rock. I mean, it's only 2 mana. And finally, I had Intruder Alarm and Ristic Studies that I could have added to this deck. However, one of those is tap-untap shenanigans that I just didn't want to mess around with, and the other is Ristic Study, which it's so strong that it just wouldn't have told me anything about how well the deck actually works. Moving to the next set, the Lost Caverns of Ixalan was a set I really enjoyed. Everyone in my playgroup has an LCI commander deck. I built Hawkball and my fiance built Pantlaza, so I knew my bulk from this set could be pretty useful. Discover could help me cheat out cards, Descend was a relatively common mechanic, meaning Mill would have to be printed on at least a few cards, and Merfolk were also important. Maybe I could snag some synergy there. Yeah, no. While I did include a few cards from LCI, they were mostly the same overcosted garbage other sets would offer, not the type of synergistic stuff I really needed. Well, except for 2 cards. Thassa, God of the Sea, was a card I cut from Hawkball immediately after buying the deck. It doesn't really care about one creature being unblockable, and she was a workhorse in the game. Malcolm, Alluring Scoundrel, is also really good, in theory, but I didn't actually play it. My opponent playing Francisco and Malcolm did though, and it's certainly a card I plan to keep in the deck. I should probably backtrack at this point because there was one set I've opened more than any other. The Lord of the Rings, Tales of Middle-earth. I bought and upgraded all 4 of the Commander Precons, which I actually used bulk to do this as well. Opened at least 1 booster box and have snagged more boosters in the year plus since it came out. It was here that I found a mechanic I had honestly completely forgotten about. The Ring. No, not the One Ring. I'm talking about the Ring Tempts You. Now, this was not my favorite mechanic. It's a bit annoying to keep track of. However, it satisfies 2 of my 3 conditions. Neerdiv can't be blocked by something that will kill her, and when she attacks, I can loot. giving me a little more choice on what I'm filling my graveyard with. Unfortunately, I only had 2 cards with this ability, Birthday Escape and Soothing of Smeagol. This is definitely a mechanic I'll look to explore more when I upgrade the deck, because I think there's some potential there. I'll make another video soon talking about what cards I cut and what I replace them with, so make sure you subscribe to not miss that. LTR wasn't a complete wash. Lorien Revealed is an incredible common, it's $4 right now, and Pelargir Survivor fits with my game plan of casting lots of instants and sorceries while also giving me an expensive mill option alongside Surrounded by Orcs. However, the GOAT of LTR, the Lord of the Ring if you will, was Captain of Umbar. It's a consistent looter, which was exactly what I needed, and a 2/3 body is nothing to scoff at. The next important set of my collection was Outlaws of Thunder Junction. First off, LOL at this set. Second, I didn't open much of it, but I had arguably the perfect bulk rare just chilling in my box. Archmage's Newt, and it's in foil. When I pulled this card, I was pretty disappointed. I wanted cards from the vault, not this shitty salamander that looks like Sid's evolved cousin. However, Archmage's Newt gives instants and sorceries in my graveyard flashback, the most important keyword this deck could ever use. This is where I should probably at least mention the greatest shortcoming of this deck. I barely had any cards that actually use my graveyard. See, there are 14 keywords that are useful in this deck, and they're all variants of flashback. And I missed out on basically every set where these mechanics were printed. I knew this deck struggled to find a win condition before playing it, so I wasn't upset about this fact, but it certainly hamstrung the deck, preventing it from really showcasing anything close to its true potential. But that's the point of building a deck with bulk. It's going to be unoptimized and, well, shitty. What else did I include that's worth mentioning? Probably the best set ever printed, Bloomburrow. I'm just kidding, although I do really like this set. I didn't have anything too great from Bloomburrow. The Commander precons didn't appeal to me much, so I really didn't buy many boosters. But one card I'm really high on is Mind Whisker. A consistent Surveil trigger is great, and that -1/-0 Anthem was surprisingly good. So good that it ate some targeted removal that could have sniped Neerdiv instead. There are a few other notable mentions before I explain what this whole process taught me. Obviously, Soul Ring and Arcane Signet are great, but I also snagged a Sapphire Medallion from my friend Sean, who was playing Francisco and Malcolm. He also gave me the Rogue's Passage and Key to the City, which I desperately needed, alongside Zephyr Boots and Milliken. I enjoyed playing this deck a ton, bad as it was. However, where it really fell short was utilizing the graveyard. The biggest reason for this was I would mill the thing that gave me recursion while failing to have any cards that could just get themselves out of the graveyard. Because of my failure to really utilize the graveyard, Neerdiv never grew stronger. She sat on my board as a 2/2 for nearly the entire game. I think she can become a legitimate lethal threat if you can chain together enough flashback-like spells, but I never got to see that side of the deck. Specific to this deck, I learned that it really doesn't need Neerdiv to function, even with how low the card quality of this deck was. I always had a full hand despite failing to trigger her second ability a single time, and the deck didn't rely on a tenuous permanent to generate card advantage. That's, of course, the value of playing mono blue. The real downfall in this deck was not having enough cards that could capitalize off of my graveyard being full. It was like I threw an alley-oop to a 7-foot-tall center who tripped before the ball even left my hand, and my deck stumbled. While this might have been an easy opportunity to be frustrated, I really felt the opposite. I was encouraged by the fact that this pile of shit could effectively mill 3/4 of my deck despite being full of bulk. A huge part of my game plan worked. Now all I have to do is connect the dots, and I feel like this will be a legitimate contender at most tables I would bring it to. What this process reawakened in me was that feeling as a kid building shitty Pokemon decks with my friends without understanding the rules. I didn't know what an energy card was, I just knew it wasn't the Charizard I wanted. It reminded me of the Warrior Yu-Gi-Oh deck I built to play with my younger brother and cousin on weekends, which I would shamelessly cheat with to make sure their older idol maintained his status as the GOAT. It really did feel like I was just making a deck for the sake of having fun, not to see how far I could push the limits of the concept. It felt like I was a kid, chasing an idea with no idea if it could actually work. And work it did, even if I didn't win the game. Honestly, I was so close to milling myself out that I would have counted it as a W in the win-loss column if I had managed to do so. I probably just needed one more turn. But don't we all? In a world where deck optimization is seemingly more important than deck construction, I had a blast putting together this pile of junk.